president did as is required. And the president has already invoked his national emergency powers on 3 occasions, adding to the 28 earlier national emergency measures that remain in effect today. This is an important point. Congress has never before moved to end a president's emergency declaration until now. Now, even the New York Times front page today painted a grim picture of what's happening at the border. Here's a quote. A feverish teenager with a vile-smelling wound on his foot, a man with a head injury and bright red eyes, children with fevers, coughs, and colds. And the Customs and Border Patrol numbers of family units crossing the border was breathtaking.
We have apprehended and encountered more families in just 5 months and 5 days than last year's record total. Now 70% of all crossings are from these countries, and a full 62% of all crossings and encounters are vulnerable families and children.
We've had almost 2,400 fraudulent claims of families.
Now, more on the dire situation of the border is going to be coming up later in the show. You do not want to miss it. It goes way beyond that. And there's a lot more in that New York Times piece we're going to get into. And we will be naming names and unmasking the motives of those on the left and some on the right who are working to stop stronger enforcement at our southern border, which includes a physical barrier. The president must continue to stand firm on this issue and forge ahead against the Chamber of Commerce Republicans who want an endless flow of cheap labor and the open borders Democrats who think they have an endless supply of new voters. And as for the Democratic impeachment squad, keep unmasking their real motives, you bet. If they cared about the Constitution and the rule of law, they wouldn't have let the border get this out of control in the first place. And they would have demanded that Hillary Clinton and her protectorate pay for their wrongdoing. That's law and order, don't you think? This is a political war. All of this that you're seeing around you. And it's meant to undo the president's successes and block his agenda for the next 2 years. That's all it's about. This isn't just harassment of President Trump. He said that today. It's harassment of the millions of Americans who voted for his agenda, and it's an abuse of the entire democratic process that the Democrats claim to care so much about. And that's the angle. All right, joining me now with reaction, Congressman Jim Jordan, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, let's start on the border issue, then we're going to get back to what else is cooking. But, I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but this is a national travesty. And the Democrats will say, oh, it's not bad at all on the border. Interceptions of people are down. There are fewer people crossing. What's the real truth?
You just heard from the agents on the border talking about how bad it is. Even the New York Times talk about the 70-some thousand just this month alone crossing the border. So I always say, if what are we on, the 5th caravan? What do we need, a 6th caravan, 7th caravan, an endless caravan before we say it's an emergency? The president is right. And some of the Republicans who are opposing the president, as you said in your opening, in your Ingram angle, some of those are the same ones who last year during the Congress didn't want to get it done when we had the majority in both the House and the Senate. So this is something that's looks like the Senate's going to vote to overrule the president's order, but when the president vetoes it and it comes back for a veto, we'll be able to sustain his veto.
Mitch McConnell.
The president's out there saving the world, and he is. And as far as the border, the hypocrisy there.
Oh, no.
You know, look at the guns. The guns. So Democrats want to take guns out of the hands of law-abiding citizens, yet they want them to flow across our border into the hands of gang members and drug dealers.
The Border Patrol today revealed shocking new numbers. You will not.
We are facing alarming trends in the rising volumes of people illegally crossing our southwest border or arriving at our ports of entry without documents. This increased flow presents, currently at our highest levels in over a decade, both a border security and a humanitarian crisis. Regardless of anyone's preferred policy outcome, the status quo is unacceptable.
Sobering new statistics today from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. In this fiscal year so far, there's more than a 300% increase in the number of family units, or people posing as family units, apprehended compared to the same time last year. And in total, CBP has arrested more than 268,000 illegals at our southwest border just in the last 5 months. Put that in perspective. That's almost the population of Durham, North Carolina, which is the 77th most populous city in America. Yet the Democrats want to block President Trump's national emergency declaration because, you know, there's no crisis at the border.
Well, this is a manufactured crisis.
I think there's a problem, not a crisis.
A wall is a colossal waste of money for a crisis that doesn't exist.
This is really a manufactured crisis on many levels, manufactured by the Trump administration.
Well, it's not manufactured unless you have open borders. Then, yeah, they're going to come right in. Even the liberal New York Times is more concerned about the plight of the illegals than their threat to our safety. Just look at the headline on the front page today. Border Patrol facilities put detainees with medical conditions at risk. Well, why is the left attacking our border agents? They're the ones putting their lives on the line every day trying to protect us, the American people. Joining me now, Howie Kurtz, Fox News media analyst and host of Media Buzz, Sundays right here on FNC, and Tim Ballard, a former DHS special agent and founder of Operation Underground Railroad, which rescues victims from human smuggling. Great to have both you on. Howie, why does the New York Times, after laying out, I want to read part of this, they lay out this harrowing story about the border, and then they claim in editorials it doesn't exist. This is part of what they wrote. Let's start with today. An average of 2,200 migrants a day are now crossing the 1,900-mile border with Mexico, many after grueling journeys that leave them injured, sick, or badly dehydrated. Yet most of the nation's customs and border protection facilities along the border lack sufficient accommodations, staffing, or procedures to thoroughly assess health needs or to provide more than basic emergency care. And then March 5th, the New York Times editorial board says that national emergency doesn't exist, saying the National Emergencies Act doesn't define what an emergency is, a loophole Trump took advantage of. Contrary to all the evidence, there's basically not a crisis at the border.
Well, Laura, I think the New York Times news story is a legitimate journalistic look at a humanitarian crisis, which, by the way, quotes Kirstjen Nielsen as saying we're doing everything we can, but we don't have the resources, which says that many of the migrants arrived, they already have chronic diseases, or they were
Why is that the American taxpayers' fault?
Well, it is a situation.
Or responsibility. It's horrible and it's awful, and parents who do this, I understand why they're doing it, but they're putting their children at risk, and themselves are, we're going to talk to Tim about, at risk of being trafficked themselves,
Fair
correct?
enough. But it underscores how much of the media are totally focused on this side of the story. This is their emergency,
right,
not the broader emergency that President Trump
not the American people, but other people.
And it enables them, many of them, to blame every bad thing that happens to migrants on the Trump administration.
Right, but even, and Tim, I'm trying to get at this, they lay out what is an emergency situation. Now, they can blame Trump for it and say it's all Trump's fault that we don't have five-star facilities at our border, hotels, full concierge medical care, you know, English language lesson. I mean, we do have a lot of good stuff for helping people, but they lay this out. So in their description, it is an emergency. They just want us to throw more money at it.
Look, I look at this through the eyes of kids. That's my job. I spent 12 years on that border, by the way, as an undercover operator, special agent, looking for children who are being trafficked into the United States to be sold to our American pedophiles. This is an emergency to these children. They're coming in here. They're being dragged by. There's a 300% increase in adults bringing children who aren't their kids.
Yeah.
So these kids are vulnerable to being trafficked. 93% of these kids that we're recovering are outside the port of entry. Okay, so where are they going? A lot of them are being used as pawns because we have this strange policy that Congress passed that says bring a kid and you can claim you know,
right, which
asylum.
is again the Democrats and Republicans both. I blame both on the angle. They are both responsible, both parties, for not addressing this asylum issue.
Right.
That as long as you come in with someone you say is related to you, you cannot be sent home. You're not. Basically, children are resettled here, even if they're temporarily, you know, for a short period of time now separated. But they are both settled here together, unless you can somehow figure out they're not related. Where is our Congress?
No,
and Trump's the problem?
Yeah, we're incentivizing smugglers. But think of this. Think like a criminal, right? You bring a kid across, and if you're caught, you can say, you know, asylum, you know, I get to stay here. But we know that they're not doing that, all of them. They're taking these kids and they're selling them into our sex markets here in the United States. And so we have to control the movements. A wall, a barrier, controls the movement so we can identify who's coming in and save these kids. Through the eyes of the kids, I see this. Save the kids.
Yeah, there's the children aspect, the suffering aspect, the health aspect. And a lot of people watching tonight are like, look, we have, I say this, we have two blocks from where we are broadcasting. Every night we drive home, and there are 7, 8 people on the street. It's freezing out tonight.
Yeah.
And these appear to be American citizens, and they're on the street 500 yards from the nation's capital. And and it's sad, it's horrible, but a lot of Americans watching, I go, why are we putting all of our resources on helping people who need to be able to thrive in their own countries?
These newcomers make America more American. And we want them, when they come here, to be fully part of our system. And that means not suppressing the vote of our newcomers to America.
She's talking about legal immigrants.
Right.
We want everyone to be able to vote.
Right.
But this is going way forward. I mean, we have Democrats pushing to legalize illegal immigrants to vote. Even if they're not citizens, that they should be able to vote. That is a new movement building slowly in localities and cities. That's what this is about. Vote.